You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلمين هناك لشوارزنيجر.
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, 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 golazo.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Kevin, when the regular season ends 1-1 between the Impact and Toronto FC, how are we supposed to do any banter? How?
Can you have it more split than that? It's basically one win each, on the road for each, and a draw to finish the season. It's a stalemate, basically, by definition.
And I do the score was even the same because CFC won 2-1 in Montreal. Montreal won 2-1 in Toronto, and they tied 2-2 in Montreal.
So the amount of goals on the road, everything's perfectly the same. If you take those three games and the box score of goals for, goals against differential, it's identical.
And I hate to break it to both Montreal Impact fans and TFC fans. If you look at those standings, there isn't that crazy of a scenario that results in a repeat of last year's playoff game on the horizon now as well. Although it is more likely that Montreal will be playing DC and that Toronto will be playing Philadelphia if they indeed both end up in the knockout stages. We're going to get into a lot more of the playoff scenarios and all that in our second block today. Obviously, Kevin and I, in a few minutes, are going to talk about the derby a little bit more. And don't worry, folks, we are going to get to the Drogba issue.
Oh, yes. We have at 11:40 today, Joey Alfieri from TSN Radio to talk about, the Didier Drogba, the saga, what happened between him and Biello. And we have a clip of Mauro Biello later on explaining the situation as well.
Yes, so that will be happening in our second half of the show. A couple little bits and bites to start with, though, in what we normally, when we write our lineup, we call this the open and banter section. So generally in our open and banter, we're going to get a couple things out here. We talked about, obviously, USL a lot last week. The USL final is set up. Kevin and I are working on making a full USL final, a USL Cup final preview show, which will happen hopefully on Wednesday, but we're going to do it right. So if we have to bump it a day, we will. So we'll let you know on that. But certainly we'll be talking to people, hopefully from New York and from Swope Park about the championship final game. It's two back-to-back years that Mark DeSantos has taken a team to a championship game. And
on back-to-back occasions, it's winning his last game in charge of that said team as well. Last year with Ottawa, this year with the Swope Park Rangers, because he is going on to coach the San Francisco Deltas, the upstart in the NSL next year.
Yes, exactly. And I think the DeSantos topic of conversation will be one that we will probably address this week a little bit more in detail about what his future is and what his strengths are and all those sort of stuff. I had a conversation on Twitter this past week that what was during the Swope Park game, actually, was what his future is and whether he'll get an MLS opportunity down the line. And, of course, the immediate reaction by a lot of Canadians in that feed was, why not give him an international opportunity? I think he's still a cycle away from that, both from his own needs and from the program's needs. But certainly the most successful Canadian coach working right now, other than Biello, maybe, which we're also going to talk about today. Those are the top two for sure, regardless. And DeSantos has had remarkable success at that high-low level of American soccer, if that makes sense. High-low, you know what I mean? The highest level of non-MLS is what I was trying to say. Speaking of lower levels, I did want to also spend a little bit of time right now to congratulate the Vaughan Azzurri, the Vaughan Soccer Club that won the League One Ontario Championship, a game that I worked this past Saturday. They beat London, FC London, which was the first-year program within the provincial program. They had previously existed as Forest City and as London in the PDL and were highly successful there as well. They went hyper-local. 18 of their 20 players were from the London area. It's exactly the vision League One Ontario has about developing the game moving forward. They came up a little short in the final, losing 4-2 to Vaughan, but a great season by London. And Vaughan obviously will go on now to take on the PLSQ champion for the Interprovincial Cup, which is the Division 3 championship of Canada.
Yes, the Griffon of Outremont-Mont-Royal will be the opponent of Vaughan-Azzurri.
Exactly, and we will probably, we will give some coverage of that when it happens, which November 13th is the final game, which will be taking place somewhere in Ontario, likely in the bubble in Pickering is going to be my guess, but that's pure speculation on my behalf. If the weather's nice enough, maybe they'll play it up at Vaughan. That would be nice too, so we'll see. Congratulations to Vaughan, though, about that. A lot of great talent on display. It was a good time had by all. I enjoyed working League One Ontario this year. You've heard me reference them a lot. 2 games left home, 1 game left in Ontario, and we'll move into the off season, and I'll hopefully enjoy being part of them again next spring.
Yes,
Kevin.
Duane, how about that Piatti goal today? As soon as, that Donadel cross, but once Piatti got the goal in the latest installment of the 4-1 derby, or the Two Solitudes derby that happened yesterday at Stade Saputo, when he got that cross, that ball, and he created the space for his right foot, I'm like, yeah, it's going in. It's going in for sure.
Yeah, the first goal by Piatti was absolutely, and considering the narrative around the game as it relates to what we'll talk about later in this half, it was certainly interesting that Piatti would pull a wonder goal out like that early on, because it illustrates to me just what is clear to anyone who's paying attention to this is Piatti's team. He is their best player. He is their most offensively explosive player. He is the catalyst that makes the Impact go. If the Impact are going to be successful in the playoffs, yes, Drogba would be nice, but I think it's more about Piatti and more about Piatti's possibilities. And I think from an Impact fan perspective, what terrifies you a little bit more than Drogba leaving, which is almost certain, is the idea that Piatti may leave too. And that is a big rebuilding process there, because this is just a brilliant player.
Those rumors have been a little bit kiboshed last week when Piatti in a Spanish interview actually said he's got a contract with the Montreal Impact next year. I think it was with Football MLS. So the En Español side of MLSsoccer.com, he was saying that he does have a contract for next year with the Montreal Impact and they would be glad to come back to play. So we'll see how that unfolds, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Piatti stays with the Impact until the end of what apparently was his contract, until the end of next year's season. So that would be the I don't really have a lot of questions surrounding that part of the Montreal Impact anymore.
Sure. Well, and time will tell, obviously. I'm not suggesting one way or the other. I just said that would be something that would be scary to an Impact fan.
Yes,
it would be
yes.
Just like there are rumors here that Javinko is leaving, and that would be scary to a TFC fan as well. So speaking of Javinko, obviously his first game back, he didn't have any direct influence. It was the Josie Altidore show in many ways. It's interesting, the contrast between Altidore and Piatti in many ways. Piatti's the pretty soulful, kind of fluid player that does pretty things, and Altidore is the grunt player that kind of gets things done in a different way.
His goal, Duane, his goal is indicative of that. He battles that there's a ball bouncing in the box and he gets in position. He just tries to tap it in to just cross the line. It's a goal because of his force, his strength, and able to hold his position and move forward, basically.
Yeah, the second goal, too, although it was obviously scored by Ricketts, the substitute came in, Canadian player, a little Canadian content in the game for you there.
Very similar, grindy, gritty type of goals.
Yeah, ball comes in, he powers up to chest it down with strength, and it's beautiful in its own way, the physicality of Altidore's game. It is not pretty like Piatti's game, but it has its own sort of brutal reality and beauty to it in its own way. So it was kind of like, if you consider the sort of the stereotypical outsiders' opinions of both Toronto and Montreal, it's kind of ironic, and not ironic. It's exactly what you'd think of. It's the opposite of ironic that this is what happened, that Josie Altidore would score the sort of workmanlike grunt, kind of non-attractive, pretty goals, whereas Montreal scores these beautiful, kind of fluid, sort of artistic goals, but it ends up squared off at the end. So there's kind of a little artistic justice in that, if you look at the stereotypes of the two cities involved, Kevin.
No, it's kind of funny you mention that. No, but and the penalty, obviously, tackled behind Piatti in the box. It was there was a foul. I'm not saying that he dove, but he kind of fell a little bit easily. But there was a foul, so a foul in the box. Either how he fell was committed.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree that it was a foul. I think that
He's got hit from behind. Like he got clipped on his heel from behind. So technically, that's a foul.
Yeah, it was a very. There was a little bit of contact that was exaggerated extremely. How's that? When a player throws his arms in the air above his head, that is, generally speaking, that means that he's embellishing, is how we're putting it nowadays. However, whatever. The reality is you shouldn't give the referee that opportunity to make the decision. So no excuses that way. MLS referees are what they are, and by this point of the season, you should damn well know that this is what they're going to call. You don't put yourself in a position to do that, whether it was a dive or not.
And not a lot of penalties for Montreal this season as a whole, though. If you look at the entire season, Montreal buried this one, Piatti. So second of the game, 17 on the season. So a very successful season for Piatti, too, with one game to go on the road in New England.
Yeah, our friend Rudy Schuler put it best to finish up the diving thought is it Italians all over the field for both sides hitting the water type thing, basically implying that Jamaica was diving too. So by and large, there was, if that's what you're going to get, though, and I mean, this is the thing about refereeing.
Rudy's right, too, because on his second free kick, like the first one, he got the bar. The second one, he shanked it a little bit. But the foul itself was not necessarily a foul too, because Donadell hit the ball, he tripped over the ball, and there was a foul called. So no, you're absolutely right. It was on both sides. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and referees are going to make those decisions sometimes too. Yeah, if they trip over the ball, just see a guy go down. That's my biggest complaint actually with the pro referees is they tend to fall, and with CONCACAF referees in general, is that they tend to get tricked a little too easily. That the whole there's no contact. It's like the no contact rule, right? You can't touch a player. You can't breathe on a player without it being a foul. That's probably my English heritage coming out there a little bit, that the idea that there should be a little bit of contact allowed in the sport.
But, a little bit of shoulder rubbing or jousting for the ball on 50-50s,
Yeah, and by and large, and that's the frustrating thing to a fan in MLS too, is it's not so much that sometimes that happens. Like in the playoffs, we're going to watch it, and this one drives me nuts to let them play the game stuff. Whereas, a foul should be a foul, and it should be the same foul all year. Whereas you'll see the referees switch a gear in the playoffs, and suddenly you could basically tackle someone in the box and not get a call, and that's ridiculous to me. So one way or the other. But at any rate, the bottom line is it was a 2-2 result, and it is probably, on the whole, I think it might have been fair. I think Montreal was the better team in the first half, and Toronto maybe came on a little bit in the second half to get the 2 goals to even it up. But by and large, probably a fair result. Outside of the Drogba situation, what is the mood in Montreal following this result? You're 3 wins undefeated now.
We'll hear more Bielsa said it himself, but the decision was not to start Drogba, even before he walked out, even before Ingrid Van Eastern went AWOL. For Montreal, the decision was to go with Mancosu, because what Mancosu brings, the space he creates up top, the different type of striker that Drogba is, creates a little bit more space for Piatti, and I've seen the combination of those two mixed with the play with Donadell moving the ball forward with other players like Oyongo using that space behind Piatti. You've seen a lot of good things coming off of the combination of Mancosu and the other players going forward, especially in the 2-win streak before this 401 derby. So that being said, you needed that type of performance from Piatti, and that's what Montreal will need to separate themselves from the other teams in the playoff, because all things considered, Montreal is deep, but if you take out their best assets of Drogba and Piatti, Montreal's not that different than DC United. If you add Piatti to the mix, on a one-off, Montreal might be better than DC United. So that's the type of difference that the natural Piatti would make on every given day. So yes, they might be over-reliant on Piatti going forward, but Mancosu brings that different option. So that's how I would look at it. Even though there's a Drogba drama, it started for sporting reasons. It started for on-the-pitch decisions, and that's what to be taken, I think, in that situation right now is the team is looking for the best ways to win, and you cannot really ask for more.
I agree with the decision to move him. I think a lot of observers, and we'll talk more in detail about the whole situation just before we bring Joey on the line, but it's made sense from a football perspective. This is not like someone, it's not Biello trying to put his mark on the team or some damn thing like that. In fact, it's kind of brave of him to do it, and it's certainly to speak it out loud at the end. But again, we'll move to that at the end.
But Montreal clinched the playoff spots. So now in fifth position right now, we'll talk about the playoff race in a second, but it is still possible for Montreal DC to switch place, and it's going to be interesting going in the next or last day of play next Sunday.
Yeah, it's still possible for Montreal to finish sixth as well. Although, like I said off the top, the most likely scenario right now is that Montreal and DC are going to play in that first round knockout game. Where it is, it's going to depend. They're in the exact same situation as Toronto in many ways heading into next week, in terms of being 1 point behind the team they're chasing to try and, in Toronto's case, get the bye, in Montreal's case, get the home game. So they are going to need to win and hope that the team that they're chasing, DC in Montreal's case, New York City FC, in Toronto's case, drops points. So that's the teams are basically in the same situation. Philadelphia with a win and a Montreal loss would actually catch the impact as well. So they do need to watch out for that, which does, of course, as I said, off the very top, put the ever so annoyingly terrifying idea of another Montreal-Toronto 3-6 playoff game, this time flipped, on the docket as well. So lots to play for in the next week, but let's take a quick break and actually get back and talk about the whole thing that happened on Sunday.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
It's very catchy. They hold jazz from the first launch of this show, Kevin.
Absolutely.
Always gets in my head. I was thinking, I was actually walking down the street the other day going, do, do, do.
That's the plan. That's the goal.
Yeah, there you go.
Speaking of goals, the goal is to make the playoffs. And now we have basically teams like New England that needs a miracle, basically, to get a playoff spot against Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's a long thing. We do typically call this the Canadian Review, but we already talked about Toronto, Montreal, so that was kind of the Canadian Review. And do we really want to talk about Vancouver nil, San Jose nil? Do we want to devote time to that?
The last game in Avaya Stadium this season. Oh, what a...
So let's move on. And I think most Whitecap fans will be happy with us just moving on. We will talk about the big Whitecaps 2 on the USL review show, where we talk about the playoffs there. They, of course, lost to Swope Park in that game, and that was unfortunate, but nonetheless, a good run for them. But 0-0 is that. So that's the end of the Canadian review. Let's get to the rest of the league. Talked already about the Toronto stuff. So, to start on the playoff side of things on the East, as you just said, Kevin, right now, the situation is pretty bleak for the Revs. They are 1 win behind and 3 points behind Philadelphia, so they will need the Union to outright lose, obviously, and that they will also need to win outright, and then they would need to turn around a goal differential, which is right now 12. So, no, the playoff teams are set.
I missed that part. That's going to be the difference. The goal scored and the goal against for New England are not up to par to make it. Yeah, so basically it'll take a miracle, but maybe they'll try to put a couple, because it's going to be Montreal, New England next week on the road. We'll see how New England approaches that game, how up for it they are, knowing that Philadelphia just gets a result and it's all done.
Wins, goal differential. That is your two situations that you have to watch here, right? So,
and win, they're going to be equal, so it will go to goal differential right away.
Which right now, as I said, it's -1 versus -13. So, the chances of that, you would need to, you folks can do the math out there. It is highly unlikely. I mean, that would be one of the strangest turnarounds on the final day of a season that you'd ever seen ever, right?
So I don't see Montreal conceding 13 goals in a game.
Yeah, well, or 7 or something, and then they score, right? So just looking quickly to see who Philly plays, because Philly's playing the Red Bulls, which the Red Bulls are going to be resting all their players because, of course, they clinched the East, which will start there. I feel ambivalent as a Toronto FC person that predicted the Red Bulls to win the East all year. On one hand, my prediction turned out to be right, even though they kind of weren't there the whole year, but they consistently just stayed a little close enough that at the end they pulled away, which does make are the Red Bulls the favorite in the Eastern Conference? I would have to say they are. They're the most battle tested. They won the East. They've got to be the favorite to advance, and they have some chance with the Shield as well.
No, they don't have a chance at the Shield because Dallas on 59 points with 1 game left, so there's no chance for Red Bulls to catch it.
At halftime, they had a chance for the Field.
Not anymore because it's Dallas or Colorado for the Shield. 59-57, Dallas 59, Colorado 57. So depending on next week's game, we'll see who wins the supporter Shield. But in the Eastern Conference, like you mentioned, the Red Bulls slowly but surely amassed points. Had a difficult start, just relying on their player Bradley Wright Phillips is battling for the Golden Boot with Aston Villa. Jesus, David Villa. There we go. So exactly, not enough.
The entire Aston Villa is a DP in MLS. How would that work?
Well, that would probably be not as actually successful as David Villa. So between David Villa and Bradley Wright Phillips, we will know the Golden Boot. But the Red Bulls are going to be the favorite in a home and away series, especially on a one game, on a one-off. You never know what can happen, and that's why for New York City FC, it's important to get that second spot, or for Toronto per se. But the Red Bulls are assured to have that bye. So in a home and away series where talent needs to shine at home, especially, I think the Red Bulls have a good chance to at least making it to the conference finals. Not easily, but easier than years prior.
Yeah, and look, the Red Bulls would be the likely, if Montreal were to beat DC, they are the likely matchup for a second round series there. So it is something that's relevant for them. I mean, Philadelphia, if they were to get Philadelphia's on terrible form, but we'll get that. Let's just keep going down the schedule here. New York City FC had a chance to pull away what they could have actually clinched a bye with the win. Based on Toronto just getting the draw, but unfortunately for them, they did lose 3-1 on the weekend. They're going to need to lose again against Columbus, lose or draw against Columbus, and have TFC beat Chicago on the final weekend to lose that by spot. That's not outrageous, especially if you consider, a tie versus a Toronto win against the worst road team in the league, and then a New York tie. That's not out of the ordinary, but at the same time, this is a test of NYCFC's great road form. They are 7-7-3 on the road. 7 wins at home on the road is by far the best road record out there. TFC's only won, so I'm going to say by far, because TFC has 6 wins, so it's not that much of a difference, but nonetheless, it is good road form. They're a team that continues to confound people. No one knows what to make of them. I don't think we have any idea what to think of in NYCFC for a playoff berth, what they're going to what they're going to look like in a playoff game. Like, do you have any concept what that's going to look like?
The kind of, if they play at home, so they kind of hope that New York the Red Bulls go all the way against New York City FC in the conference finals, because then they would play at Red Bull Arena, which is wider, which gives more chance for the talented players of NYCFC to shine than if they play at Yankee Stadium. So you kind of want that road form to continue. Unfortunately, that loss to DC hits that form on the road, but you do have a team that's more confident and maybe more talented, and especially more fit to use that talent when they have more space, and Yankee Stadium pitch doesn't lend itself to be a big canvas like other pitches are for this team.
Yeah, we actually, I went out to the Duke of Gloucester yesterday to watch the TFC Impact game. I was going to go to Montreal, but in the last second I went, it's raining. I don't know. I don't feel like it.
It was very cold, very rainy, and it was like literally Mother Nature crying the absence of Didier Drogba.
Yeah, I when it comes to a road trip, it's not the getting there that always bothers me. It's the getting home. So yeah, I decided to stay in Toronto. But anyway, the point I'm making is having a conversation with people about the concept, the sort of the MLS's nightmare scenario of NYCFC hosting the MLS Cup final, which is not that crazy. If they were to win the Eastern Conference, they, could very well, if it was an upset in the West, be the host. So what would they do? Would they play it at Red Bull Arena? Because that would make a lot of sense. It would be a nicer arena. Of course, you have the big Red Bull symbol there, but that's whatever. You'd hopefully fill the crowd up.
You can put a sign over it or like a tarp over it or something. But that'll be difficult, though. Yankee Stadium will probably be the venue because it's the home stadium. And
home stadium,
when you decided to do this a few years ago, you made a decision. You have to go with it. You just can't change it when it doesn't suit your need.
And we know it won't be at Hofstra because...
Even quick NASL note, if there is an NASL championship match involving the Cosmos at home, the rights will probably be sold because Hofstra will not be suitable for it.
They'll probably play it at the 2nd seed. I don't know where or how they'll do that. Maybe they could play it up here. That'd be fun. You could play the the NASL final in Toronto.
First time since 1984.
There you go. I'll do that.
Soccer Bowl.
Played at Varsity Stadium. A little historical matchup. That's my. If NASL people are listening, I'm bidding for the game to be played at Varsity Stadium.
We're gonna everybody pitch in. Let's go to patreon.com/sports podcast network. Let's host the NASL final.
We're going to crowdsource this out. Anyway, all right. Sorry, NASL fans, but that's all right. Moving on here. We already talked about Toronto, DC United. Obviously, that's an interesting team heading into the playoffs. And as I said, Montreal's most likely opposition in this. Now, when I'm done this show, and I promise this to my friends in Vocal Minority, I'm actually going to go look and see how much form matters heading into the playoffs, historically speaking, because there's always this scenario out there, this belief out there that the hottest team at the right time down the stretch is a team that can go deep in the playoffs. I understand as a sports fan that that's something that seems intuitive, but I'm going to check it out and see this, because there's no doubt that in the East, DC United is, the hottest team out there right now. They have torn their way up from basically being below the red line most of the season, and now they sit in a solid 4th with a chance to host a playoff game if they get a win this week. Let's just quickly check who they're playing. DC United is up against. I got to flip between 3 different screens here, so they're playing Orlando, so they are on the road against Orlando. That's a bit of a. They should, if they want to host that game, that's winnable. We'll say that. So at any rate, they're an interesting team, and a team that's got to scare you a little bit as a potential opponent in that first round, Kevin, especially. But the Montreal, Impact form isn't bad either. But what are your thoughts about that potential and most likely matchup right now?
Well, DC United, it depends of the conditions and everything on RFK. We all know that, but it's a type of team that it's a team concept. There's no one superstar. It's a type of team that will defend. Still very tight with Ben Olsen, the way they play, the way they keep their formation intact. It'll be difficult. The home field advantage would be important. So depending on number 4, number 5, depending on next week's result, will determine a lot, I think, in that one-off between potentially DC and Montreal. If it's in Montreal, I do feel it's going to be a very different game than if it's in RFK.
Yeah. Look, Patrick Rollins has made a big difference since he came over, got an opportunity there, and is emerging as their go-to player. But Patrick Rollins is not a player that you're going to think of in the same frame as some of the top players in the league. As you said, a team concept, more or less. Certainly a dangerous team in the playoffs. We'll watch that closely. We got to go quickly through these here now.
Western Conference, Duane.
Well, we should mention Philly really quick.
Philly lost to Orlando. Come on.
Spiraling out of control, and I think that they have gone from a team that at one point you might have been thinking to look for a second place bye, even to now they're barely holding on. They'll make it because of what we said earlier, but certainly I thought the best thing for Toronto this past weekend was the result sort of shook out that it looks like it'll be Philly, and Philly seems like an easy touch at home. Not that any easy touch, no history to point to that Toronto's going to have anything easy in the playoffs. However, if you're going to pick a name and choose it yourself, I think Philly's who they would have liked. So there you go. Let's move to the West, Kevin. And
my prediction still could be possible. Kansas City can make the playoff. It's very tight with Portland for that 6th spot. 1 point for the Seattle Sounders in 5th with 45, and Salt Lake with 46. The last 3 positions are still up for grabs, and Portland is still in the conversation with 44 points, virtually tied its own differentials with Kansas City as we speak. A lot of things still left because whatever happens, Real Salt Lake, which are in 4th position right now, depending on the results of the game next week, could even be out of the playoffs. You can go from 4th to 7th. It's from 44 points to 46. It's all up for grabs still in the Western Conference. It's literally 4 teams battling for 3 spots.
Yeah, and look, how quickly things can change, right? Seattle went at the start of this week, earlier this year, everyone was talking about how Seattle was the hottest team in the West, how they
fired Siggy Schmidt.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what we're talking about half season. But I mean, a week or so ago, they were talking about the hottest team in the West, that they had turned things around after they got rid of Schmidt, that they suddenly were Western Conference potential champions, and now with a draw against Houston, a loss against Dallas, so the state of Texas took them down a notch, and now they're sitting on the position where they need to win on their final week to make sure they're still playing, right? So that's how quickly.
But that little free kick from far away that bounced in was pretty sweet.
Yeah, there you go. So a lot can change there. So yeah, the battle royale on the final week between those four teams. And RSL, we're going to go up the standings rather than down, I guess. RSL, they have not won a game since July or August, early August. No, it's July. Actually, it's July was the last time they won a game, late July. So that's it is certainly not a team that is streaking at the right way. Although I will point out to RSL fans out there, that they were eliminated basically on the second last week of the season in 2009, and then they went on to win the MLS Cup when 17 different things happened the right way for them in the final weekend. So there you go. Speaking of teams going the other direction, that didn't make any sense. Speaking of teams that aren't going backwards, is the LA Galaxy.
Yeah, the teams go forwards.
Yeah, who now at 51 points. And an interesting battle, if you want to think about it for our Eastern Conference listeners. Toronto FC had been ahead of LA all year. And that matters in the sense that if Toronto were to advance to an MLS Cup final against the Galaxy would now host it, whereas up until last weekend, it would have been the opposite. And I think that a lot of people would have given Toronto a good chance to beat LA in Toronto, but not necessarily out there. I'm really looking ahead when I say that sort of stuff. But nonetheless, it is something to watch in the last weekend, not just your own standings in your own conference, but also to look how you match up in a potential MLS Cup final. Because, of course, the highest seed does host now the Galaxy with the big win over Seattle. Wasn't Seattle. Seattle was playing Dallas. Trying to get it to my head here. Who did Kevin?
To finish the playoff race, Duane.
Houston.
Houston. To finish the playoff race, we have Colorado and Dallas battling for the Supporters Shield and on top of the Western Conference. Dallas on 59 points, but their last game next week at 4 p.m. Eastern is versus LA Galaxy on the road. A very tough game at StubHub Center for Colorado at home against Houston. Not that difficult of a game comparing to what Dallas has to face. To win the Supporters Shield, it's all up for grabs, and it's between those two teams. That's the narrative concerning those teams, is who will grab the Shield.
Yeah, I watched the Colorado-Portland game was a game I chose to watch for the second half of the games. The Rapids look like a team that had played 3 games in 8 days, is what I'll say about it. They didn't look particularly good. Portland was full measure for that win. Addy with maybe the miss of the season. If you haven't seen it, check it out. He missed the penalty. The penalty was saved, and then in his follow-up, he had a wide open goal, and he somehow squared it wide. So at any rate, it was one of the worst misses I've seen since the old famous Kai Kamara one. Nothing can beat that one. He tripped over the ball and handed the ball over the line anyway.
And Duane, the other important game too is Seattle RSL. Winner goes in, loser probably goes home.
Yeah,
and if there's a draw, they might be both be in.
So maybe they'll play for the draw.
And then it's Vancouver-Portland. Vancouver has a chance to redeem some type of dignity by beating a Cascadia opponent at home and deprive them of a playoff spot. If Vancouver wins, it's all over for Portland.
Exactly. And we'll preview these games a little bit more in the days ahead, obviously, but we should probably take a break now because we did want to set up the Joey Alfieri interview with a little bit of Drogba talk of our own first. So let's take a break quick.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And welcome back. Kevin, you would have to be the biggest Drogba apologist in the world to actually support what he did this past week. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, well, there was speculation that it started as soon as Patrick Friolet from RDS mentioned it. He was the first to report yesterday during the day before the match that Drogba won't be in the 18, and he mentioned that it's not because of injury. And then later on, before the game, Mauro Biello on the broadcast said it's because of a lower back stiffness, and he felt something in the bag on training, and that's been put to rest after the match when Mauro Biello address the situation to start the press conference, saying no. He had a meeting with Didier Drogba the day before, saying, Didier, you're not going to be part of the starting 11 for the game tomorrow. I want you on the bench and to come in at the 60th, 70th minute and have an impact on the game. And Didier Drogba mentioned according to, he didn't agree with this plan and didn't want to be in the 18. So that's what happened. And he was in the 18. And Montreal, 2 goals by Piatti. Decent game, decent movement going forward. Yes, Toronto had a better second half, but decision was for on the pitch, and it was more Biel's decision not to include him in the starting 11. So that's where it all started.
Yeah, look, that's what I said. Obviously, Drogba still has the potential to make an impact in MLS. There's no doubt about that. But I think most people that have been observing this team over the past few months have suggested, and I think correctly, that his potential impact is 60 minutes on, that you have this weapon sitting on the bench that is 38 years old. And, I don't care. Drogba was a brilliant player in his time, but the father time does not, stop for any man, right? So he may not have 90 minutes in him anymore, but he does have 20, 30 minutes in him. And he certainly is a player that if you are trying to craft a game plan against them, that if it made it a hell of a lot easier in Toronto to realize that they could just go for it when they fell behind in the second goal off that penalty. They could put Ricketts in rather than having to worry about sort of defending as much as they might have had they known Drogba was coming in off the bench, because one of his great skills is the ability to kill teams on the counter. And certainly when you're pushing forward to try and tie a game, it's almost a defensive measure
and
to have right there.
And his physical presence when he comes into a game. We've seen his presence over the last few weeks when he came in late in the game, gets behind a free kick, gets an opportunity, gets in the box, sees a couple of players, does true ball, holds up the ball, and creates space for Piatti or other players. This longer in the game, if he's more fresh, actually has more impact, no pun intended. And we have seen this happen a few weeks ago. And going forward, that seemed to be technically, if you just look at the way Mauro Biello was managing the team and with the results accordingly, it was the trend. It really was. And the trend, like everybody was saying, they did not expect to start on this day. And there was a scare earlier this week when Mancosu seemed to have an injury and seemed to have a few knocks, and Drogba was told to be prepared to start. And eventually that didn't happen. Maybe that's why he felt the way he felt. But that still goes back to, on the football side, it was the right decision not to start Didier Drogba and to have him in a potential threat later on in the game. But he didn't seem to agree with that.
Yeah, and it's a classic case of one man bigger than a club, right?
If you can read French, I urge you to go to my Twitter feed. I retweeted a letter wrote by Bleu Blanc Noir on Facebook, and basically I'll just say the gist of it. In French, it says, look, before, when the media or other people called you a princess, I was defending you. We were defending you as supporters because we've seen the effort, we've seen everything else. This time around, it's the first time that you let us down. So you did great things for us, but yesterday you let the fans down. And that was the feeling of a lot of fans still going on social media 24 hours removed. It's still a feeling of Didier kind of let the fans down.
Yeah, well, the Montreal fans have a banner that flies it or that is hung every game that says Drogba Legend on it. And
Same banner that was in Chelsea. It's a loan from Chelsea supporters.
And I'm wondering whether it will be hung at the next game, because not only did he walk away from the club, which is inexcusable at any time. Like I don't have the Impact fandom to hold me back at all when I say this. I don't think there's no excuse for what he did, in my opinion. But he also did it during a game that matters more than most others to the Montreal fans in terms of the Toronto game, right? So it's a double whammy. Like, could you imagine, him walking away before an Arsenal game in London? Could you see that happening? No, you couldn't. And I don't understand how he feels that this is okay. But nonetheless, this is what happens when you're Major League Soccer and you have these DPs, is that they do ultimately have a little bit more. Like, no man is bigger than the club, but in some ways they are, because they make a lot more money than their teammates, and they are brought in as these marketing machines. Real quickly before we take a break to get Joey in the line, I did have a poll out. I'll tell you the results right now, and then we'll continue to have this conversation with Joey. The Sportsnet poll was simply this: what should the Impact do about Drogba? Suspend him and move on. Dock his pay. Hope he comes back. Nothing, wait and see, or accommodate him fully. The results are suspend him, move on 60%. So that sort of tells you right now where most people's positions are. Doc Pay, hope comes back, was 13. 22% were just say, just see what happens. And 5% said accommodate him fully, which is basically just back over. And Biello might as well hand in his resume or sort of hand in his letter of resignation at the same time if he does that. Kevin, let's take a break. Get Joy in line. And we're going to run a little clip of Mario Biello as well after this.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
I just want to put things clear because I know there's be questions. Didier wasn't selected to start the game, and I spoke with him yesterday. He didn't accept the fact to come off the bench, and in the end, he did not want to be in the 18. Yes, there's a little bit of tightness in his back, but he was capable of playing, and he said that he didn't accept the fact that he was coming off the bench. Well, the club is going to take care of the situation. Why hasn't he been in the starting 11? If you see the performance from Matteo, I decided to give a different look to the team, to add a little bit of energy up front, the ability to transition quickly. And for me, this is basically the decision, the ability to put a little bit more pressure on their back line. This was the decision. And to have Didier come off the bench, which is also an excellent tool to have, and to come in late in the game to give me a free kick to bring his presence. So I just made a decision to change things up, and that's it.
And welcome back to Soccer Today. It's a great pleasure that we are joined by Joey Alfieri from TSN Radio, sideline reporters during the broadcast of the Montreal Impact game. Joey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, guys. How are you?
Pretty good.
Joey.
Busy day, Joey. We know with the Montreal Alouette situation today too. But first, to start with, Duane, what's your overall thought on yesterday?
Listen, I thought with Drogba, I mean, it wasn't completely out of left field. Just with the way this whole thing started at the beginning of the season, is he coming back? Is he not coming back? I think obviously there was maybe a little bit of a divide there. Once that happened, once it wasn't clear cut that he was coming back or not coming back, I think that kind of annoyed the Impact front office, and they, obviously they would take him back if he was willing to come back. But I do think that maybe fractured the relationship a little bit. Now, has it been repaired from now till then? I mean, only they know. But when I first of all, at the beginning of the week, Matteo Mancosu had some stiffness in his knee. So I figured Drogba would start. Drogba trained for 3 days, missed Friday's training session, which was, a little strange. But then I was there and they had a light session. So I guess he just went in for some physio. Then he trained again on Saturday. So I figured, I thought there was an outside chance that he might even start this game depending on how Mancosu was feeling. But obviously that wasn't in the cards. And it was surprising, obviously, when you hear that he refused to be on the starting 18 when all that rumbling came out. So disappointing. I've been on the Drogba bandwagon when a lot of people this season have bashed him. I was the one who went to bat for him just because I thought it was the right thing to do, and I thought that the Impact are better with him than without him. But in this case, it's very hard to defend a move like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And Montreal fans are famously passionate about their teams and their players. They'll defend them to the death, but they're also have a certain level of expectation of what they give back. Do you think maybe he's crossed a line that won't allow him to repair that damage with the fans in the days ahead, or will all be forgiven if he comes back and performs?
Yeah, I think it's just a case of if he comes back for this last game against New England, or if he even comes back for the playoffs and he contributes, I think all will be forgotten. At the end of the day, I think everybody realizes that this is it, right? Like, if he plays against New England, it's his last regular season game in MLS, most likely. And then whenever the Impact get bounced from the playoffs, or if they win the championship, then that would be his last game in MLS. So I think people, he doesn't really need their approval, after the next couple weeks or even a month or whatever. So I think this is one of those things, though, where if he performs, he'll be fine. All will be forgiven. But I think, it's flying under the radar a little bit in other MLS cities, but Didier Drogba hasn't really had the support of the fan base for the most part of this season. I think, people are quick to point out that the Impact have a better record without him than with him. And a lot of people agreed that Matteo Mancosu has been the better player over, since he's arrived from Italy. So it's not like Drogba, people have been pounding their fists on the desk here, hoping that he'd play. It hasn't been that way. So, it'll be interesting to see. I think there's a lot of warts on the roster still. I think there's a lot of shortcomings. And the one way the Impact are going to make a run is if Drogba catches fire. And obviously he can't do that if he's not playing, but that's just, just my 2 cents. So I definitely think the Impact still need him. All will be forgiven, though, if he can contribute.
Patrice Bernier, of course, came out after the fact and said that he would be welcome back in the dressing room with open arms if he did decide to come back. Well, what is your take, early days, but what is your take in terms of the possibility of that? Do you think this will get resolved in time for next week?
That's a great question. That's what everybody's wondering. Obviously Drogba took to Twitter to congratulate the Impact on making the playoffs again. So, what does that mean? Only really he knows at this point. But I guess this is really going to depend. The Impact have made it clear that they're not going to put anybody, not even him, before the team. So I guess this is really going to fall on him. Is he willing to come back if he's not in the starting 11 next week or in the playoffs? It's only he can decide that. If he wants to come back, my feeling is that he'll give it a try. I don't think he wants to go out this way. Maybe he plays elsewhere next year. But I think to really end your tenure, which is a very successful tenure in MLS, by the way, to end it this way, I just don't think it's right. Maybe he slept on it, maybe he thought about it, and then maybe he is willing to come back, or who knows? Maybe the Impact give in and maybe they do put him back in the starting 11. I don't think that'll be the case. That would kind of defeat the purpose of what they've been wanting to do here or what they're trying to set up. But in the end, only really he knows. But if you're asking me to predict, my gut tells me that he'll be back at some point.
Speaking of successful tenure, Nacho Piatti again yesterday, 2-goal performance, a wonder goal. How impressive has Nacho Piatti been, according to you, Joey, being on the sideline, seeing him up close?
Man, up close, it's something else. The way that he can move and the way he sees things unfold before they even happen. It's been a joy to watch since he's come over. And this year in particular, just with what he's able to do on the pitch. And it's clear that when he's not around, the Impact aren't nearly as dangerous in the attacking third as when he's there. He's been phenomenal. I think he's in the MVP conversation for me just because he is that valuable to the Montreal Impact. But, I can understand how other guys across the league might be ahead of him. But he's definitely a candidate at the very least. And just watching him up close, like even yesterday on that first goal, it's something else to see. And, if you're in the stands, it's pretty cool. But just watching from pitch level, watching him do his thing, it's really incredible. And, I know there's another year left on his contract. So hopefully, everything stays status quo, and hopefully he'll be back for the Impact for at least one more season. But definitely fun to watch. He's definitely worth the price of admission. And he's been fantastic, and they definitely wouldn't be where they are right now without him.
We've talked about Drogba. We've talked about Nacho Piatti. Who is, in your opinion, a underrated player with the Montreal Impact as we speak this season? A workhorse, maybe, or even a dark horse of this team. Outside of the DPs, who do you consider a valuable piece of this team going forward?
Yeah, no-brainer to me. This one is, for me, is Ambroise Oyongo. I think, he's the only fullback on the team that can get you, that provides you with a threat going forward. He's been much better, even defensively. He's a guy who logs a lot of minutes. You notice when he's not there, when he's gone because of suspension, injury, or international duty, you see it. You see it right away. The Impact don't have that push from the back that they normally do. For me, that's a guy that people talk about him, but I don't think they talk about him enough, because that was a great pickup by the Impact. Obviously, it ended up costing quite a bit, but still, I think if the Impact don't have Ambroise Oyongo, that's another guy that he definitely has helped put them where they are. And you saw it yesterday too. The big save on that attempt when it was, I believe it was still 2-1 for Montreal. He came up with a huge save, and after the game, I spoke to him. I asked him, do you ever think about playing keeper? He actually told me a funny story about how how once when he was with the New York Red Bulls in a reserve league match, one of the keepers got injured and he actually went in and finished the game. So, I think for me, Ambros Ayongo has been fantastic this season. He's unique in his skill set when it comes to what the Montreal Impact have, and that's definitely the unsung hero of the season for me.
One of the things to just quickly go back a little bit to the Drogba situation that I think's being not focused on enough is the candor of Biello at the end of the game and his willingness to put his neck out like that and to say it that bluntly. You rarely see it. What does that say about him as a coach and his growth as a leader of that team?
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And I wasn't, I went into that press conference because the Impact, keep in mind, that, going into the game, it said that Drogba was unavailable because of back stiffness. But, I wasn't expecting Montreal to come out and say it. But, credit to Mauro Biello. He came out. He's put all the facts on the table and explained it. And, I think it just goes to show what I said before. I think that, you have a guy who's going to come in and who's going to kind of not put anyone before the team. And this is definitely putting your money where your mouth is, because they've been saying this all year that, they're not going to put any individual before the team. But I mean, this is the biggest name by far on your team. And this is where you put up or you shut up with your theory of not putting anyone before the team. And they definitely put up. So I think credit needs to be given to them. Now, whether the players agree or whether they all agree or don't agree or whatever the case may be, I mean, the organization yesterday after the game, they showed that they're not going to take crap from anybody, and they're not going to cover up, and they're not going to protect you if they feel that you're in the wrong. So, they're not hiding, or bowing down to Drogba here. I think this is a case of, Mauro Biello stepping up, calling things the way they are. And I definitely think that for me, if I was a player in that room, I'd definitely think even more highly of Mauro Biello than I already did.
Now, when we speak about this team heading to the last game of this season, Joey, New England on the road, possibility of home game one-off to get into the home and away series against either DC or possibly Toronto on the road. How do you approach the last game of this season, knowing that you kind of need a result to play maybe at home against a DC United? How do you handle that game going into having maybe 1 or 2 games in 8 days after that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to be all in here. I think you got to go all in regardless of what the schedule is going to end up looking like afterward. I think you really, as bad as the Impact have been at home, I think they finished the year 5-5-5 now at home or whatever it is in all competitions. I think that it's just one of those things where you need the home game, and you guys see how it is in MLS. As good as the Impact have been on the road, there's no doubt, not just for the financial implications, but I think just you want to play that one-off game. Anything can happen in a one-off, but you'd rather put the odds on your side, and playing at home is something that you'd obviously prefer doing. So I think the Impact need to go all in, dress your best 11. If you thought that yesterday was your best 11, go back to them against New England and just try to pick up the win. And then you worry about once you come away with the points, hopefully that you're aiming for, and you have that home game the following week, then you can worry about your lineup and playing, multiple games in less than a week or whatever it is. But first, I think you need to be all in. I think you need to be all in and go get this home date for the playoffs.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I suspect that the possibilities, the probabilities are pretty strong that it will be DC United, and whether that game's in DC or Montreal is up for grabs still. But the likelihood is that will be the matchup. How do you feel that they do match up with DC?
You know what? I think if you look on paper, and on paper it obviously doesn't mean anything, but I think the Montreal Impact have a better team than DC United. The one thing I'd say, and I do think DC United is a much better matchup for Montreal than Toronto FC. I think Montreal wants to avoid Toronto like the plague, and I don't blame them with the way Toronto's played them for the most part this year. But with DC United, the wild card in all of this is Bill Hamid. I mean, that's what it is. If you look the last couple of years, and Bill Hamid, assuming he's available for these playoff games and everything checks out health-wise from now to the end of the year, I mean, Bill Hamid has stood on his head multiple times in Montreal on the road. And there was a performance last year. Kevin, you might remember the stats exactly, but I think the shots toward goal were like 16-1 or whatever the case may be.
It was 1-0.
And I mean, Bill Hamid absolutely, I mean, Bill Hamid absolutely stood on his head, and it was just, it was something to watch. I'd never seen such a dominant performance like that. So, I do think Montreal would prefer DC United, but that Bill Hamid, in goal has to make them nervous. There's no doubt about that.
It's fun times ahead, playoff times. It's always fun. Joey, we appreciate your time. I know you've got busy work with CFL today as well, so we'll let you get back to it. And thanks again for your time today.
No worries, man. I appreciate you guys having me.
Thank you, Joe.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
All right. Thanks again to Joey for taking some time. Real quickly, we'll wrap the show now. Joey, as I said, he also covers the CFL Alouettes, and I'm not familiar with the player, but a fairly big player was released today or something, Kevin.
Two of them. So Joey Alfieri, a big day ahead in the Montreal sports scene. We thank him again, and you can listen to Joey on TSN 690 with the Impact this week, and as well during the broadcast of the games. He's sideline reporter.
All right. I'll ask you, we didn't really get into it too strongly. What is your feeling on the Drogba situation? Do you think he'll be back, Kevin?
It's kind of hard. Is it a trust breaking moment that you can't move on from? Is it like a deal breaker? It's like a game changer, kind of. It depends how it's been handled. That tweet from Drogba after the game congratulating the Impact, and I can see it as an olive branch maybe on this side. We'll see how it goes this week. We'll see if he's back on training today, tomorrow, the next following days. We'll see how that unfolds. That will be very telling heading into New England. I think the way the club handled the situation going forward, where if it's going to be suspended, because we heard Morbiello earlier on this show from yesterday, the press conference, where he said the club will act accordingly. We'll make a decision, and we're going to see where we go from there. So in the next few days, it'll be interesting to see what that decision is, what that position from the club will be facing Didier Drogba. Is he back? Will he be back? Will he be back in the starting 11? Will he be back on the bench? Will he be back at the club at all? So those are all possibilities in the next few days.
Yeah, and look, I again, as I asked to Joey, I think the Biello situation here is interesting too, and it's going to say a lot about what kind of support he has with the ownership there. We assume it's good. We assume that that's what they want as their long-term person. They've brought him up through the system. He's an impact guy. But if something comes from above and overrules his decision in there, that's going to put some strain on that relationship. So I think that's also an interesting side of this. As I said, the fact that Biello came out so candidly to say, no, this was my decision. That's him putting his stamp on this team.
In a way, he didn't really have a choice, though, because the information was out there at multiple sources on multiple different levels and was pretty solid. So it's kind of, you have to acknowledge it, too. You can't just bury yourself in your head in the sand. So
he would.
Yeah, true. And they could have, and they maybe tried, and then it didn't work, and they changed their stance. Those are all possibilities. But Montreal Impact were transparent in the situation with the press conference of Mauro Biello after the game, which before the game, you can try to eliminate doubt to try to focus on the game, and you can be transparent after the game, and that's fair game in my opinion. And they were honest after the game. So you have to give credit to Mauro Biello and the Montreal Impact organization for being transparent on this situation after the game.
Has Joey said anything publicly about this?
I haven't seen anything. No, exactly. I think what Mauro Biello says represent what the club is thinking, and that's another way to give credit and power to your coach, is when your coach is the voice and everybody gets behind that voice, it does give credence to some type of decision that on the pitch is very justifiable. I go back to that because I think that's the most important reason here, is to give Montreal a better chance to win over 90 minutes, over 4 weeks of playoff, or just get to the playoffs, like the 2-win streak before this 2-2 draw. Those were the right sporting decision to do.
No, I think that there's very little doubt that, as we said, I'm mixing up whether it was off air or on air, but I'll say it again right now, that the danger of him coming off the bench allows you to change your tactics. It forces teams to adjust what they're doing as well. So I think that it does make a lot of sense to have as a 60-minute plus player, because I don't think he has 90 in him anymore. I don't think he's had 90 in him really consistently all that often over the past couple of years at any level. Certainly this is the end for sure. And you would like to see him go out and better. There'd be a real shame for a player of Drogba's stature and for the entire relationship between the Drogba and the Impact to end the way like this. Like you wouldn't want it Biello making a decision and then him walking away from the club. That's a really crappy way to end a career like his.
Because you remember in January and the whole Gus Hiddink Chelsea situation, rumors, and then actually negotiations with MLSRs and all that. Remember all that? We actually went past that and had a decent season. He wasn't as successful as the years prior. He was used a little differently. But, still, it was a good relationship with the fans and with the club. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but what happened yesterday might be indicative of the last few weeks. We don't know. But, that's at least it's a shame because they were past like the first hurdle together, the fans and the reception of Drogba. And they were past the first hurdle with the January situation with Chelsea. And now there's Sunday.
Well, yeah. And as a final thought on this, before we wrap, I think that ultimately, from his perspective, you would think that he would also not want to tarnish his relationship with the players that he's played with. Even if the club, let's say he doesn't respect Biello. Let's say he doesn't even, maybe even in his heart, he regrets coming to MLS or Montreal. And I'm not saying this is what's happening, but let's just say for the sake of argument, that's what he thinks. You'd think for a guy like him that's always prided himself on being a good leader and a teammate, that he wouldn't want to walk out on the guys with him in the dressing room, and that ultimately might lead him back. I don't know if that's the best way for him to come back, but nonetheless, I just have a hard time thinking that this will be the end because of that very reason, that he will want to go and stand up for the guys that he stood beside, because it would be really a really questioning on his legacy sort of decision if he walked away from his teammates. The club's one thing. He walked away from the Chinese club because they weren't paying him. You can understand that. But to walk away from his teammates like that, then you'd have to really question a lot of what the narrative of Drogba was over the years, in my opinion anyway.
Hashtag my autobiography is called Commitment.
Yeah. You made a commitment. I think you should probably fulfill it. Kevin, on that note, as always,
tomorrow,
say goodbye.
11 a.m. for Soccer Today. And until then, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.